How's it going, everybody? We are finally here at the end of What If Season 2. I decided to bunch together the last 3 episodes, so let's get into it. Episode 7 is called What If Hela Found the 10 Rings? Now, this episode is more or less a alternate telling on the plot of Thor 1, where Thor, who, lacking humility, is sent to Earth by Odin without Mjolnir, though he places the worthiness enchantment on it so that Thor can prove himself and regain the hammer. In this version, Odin places a worthiness enchantment on Hela's helmet, which instead of being an enchantment based on worthiness, it's about being merciful. So this takes place at the end of the conquest of the 9 realms, and Hela, who wants to continue killing and conquering, is banished to Earth, specifically China, rather than Niflheim or wherever it was she fought the Valkyries in the MCU. And this is in China during the reign of the Mandarin. Now, without her helmet, Hela is basically just a woman. She doesn't even seem to have the strength or durability of the average Asgardian, and she has no powers without her helmet. Because of this, she's easily taken by Wenwu's forces, and he tries to proposition her and ask her to be an ally to conquer the world, but she refuses and escapes to Ta Lo, the secret society that guards the gate to the underworld. There she convinces a warrior named Jia Yi to teach her their secret martial arts, and though she doesn't complete her training, she ends up teaming up with the Mandarin to defeat Odin, who has come to Earth not only to avenge Hela's death as he believes that she was killed by the Mandarin, but also to take the 10 rings from the Mandarin because he believes that's too powerful of a weapon for humanity to have in his hands. Now, the theme of this episode was that Hela is trying to break free from the control of her father and from what her father made her to be, which is a weapon. Fighting alongside the Mandarin, they do manage to defeat Odin, and when she has the opportunity to kill him using his own spear, Gungnir, she instead spares his life, which activates the enchantment on her helmet, and she regains her power, except now she gains like a white version of her armor, like she's Hela the White or something, which makes no sense for Norse mythology, or even Marvel's version of Norse mythology, which takes liberty with a lot of the stories. Now, to be fair, the MCU version of her character and her powers don't fit the comic book version. In the comics, Hela is the goddess of death, and that isn't just a symbolic title with her actual powers just being to chuck swords at people. In the comics, she has superhuman strength, speed, durability, immortality, all the makings of an Asgardian. She can also manipulate magic, she can astral project, and she has control over life and death. So she is far more interesting and powerful, in my opinion, than the version from the MCU. But with this newfound power, she takes the throne of Asgard from Odin, and her and Wenwu basically combine their forces into an Asgardian / 10 Rings army and go around the universe freeing the oppressed. It's shown that they eventually make it to Thanos, and they leave it on a cliffhanger, but you assume that she was able to either kill Thanos or stop him from his conquest. And to me, this whole concept is kind of hilarious, given that they're kind of rewriting history with Hela's character, because even in the beginning of this episode, Odin sends Hela to Earth because she wants to continue killing people. And it always seemed like it was more just a part of her nature rather than something that Odin kind of spurred on and molded her into. But they changed that for this episode, so I thought the whole premise was kind of silly. And that's all I have to say about that one. Episode 8, on the other hand, I was initially very excited for because it's a version of the 1602 universe. Now, Marvel's 1602 is a Marvel graphic novel. In fact, it's the first graphic novel and first comic book that I've ever read. And to this day, it is still my favorite alternate Marvel universe. And so the premise of this story is that Captain America, in an alternate universe, is sent back in time to the late 1500s. Because he isn't meant to be there, that universe forms antibodies in the form of heroes of the Silver Age, except that they're appearing about 400 years too early. Now, I should clarify, these heroes weren't created in the sense that they didn't just get their powers all of a sudden in the year 1602. Rather, they've all been alive already before Steve Rogers arrived. They've already gained their powers through whatever means. It's just that they come together in 1602 to create a Marvel Age. Now, when Steve initially arrived in this world, he arrived in North America and he was taken in by some Indians. And he basically presented himself as being a white Indian and everyone just accepted it. Like they thought he was a descendant of some Welsh travelers who bred into a Native American tribe or something. As for the characters that you get to see, you get Charles Xavier in the X-Men, Magneto in the Brotherhood, Nick Fury, the Fantastic Four, the Hulk, Daredevil, Doctor Strange and Clea, Black Widow, Doctor Doom. There's all kinds of cool characters and cool stuff in there, and I just thought it was a really interesting way of bringing the Silver Age and the Marvel Age into a different time period. Now, the message of the 1602 universe is to show just how timeless these characters from the Silver Age were, and how what they stood for and what they could do wasn't limited to one time period. It could happen at any time, and it just shows you the need for heroes in any universe. Unfortunately, the What If episode presents it as, hey, how kooky would it be if the MCU characters wore Renaissance outfits? It really doesn't go into a deeper exploration than that. So in this episode, Captain Carter is taken from her universe into the 1602 universe by the Scarlet Witch, and she's brought there in order to fix these time rifts that are popping up and basically sucking up characters like Hela, who replaces Queen Elizabeth as the queen figure in the story. Now, you don't get characters like Peter Parker, the X-Men, the Fantastic Four, the Brotherhood, Doctor Doom, Daredevil. Instead, it's just versions of the MCU characters like Scarlet Witch, Thor, Loki, Scott Lang, Happy Hogan, Bucky, Bruce Banner, and Steve Rogers. Also, Steve Rogers was voiced by Josh Keaton, the Spectacular Spider-Man, which is very odd to hear. I don't know if he's been voiced by that actor in every episode, but on the other hand, they have Mick Wingert voicing Tony Stark, and he does a very good job. Also, Steve Rogers is a version of Robin Hood in this universe called Roger Hood, but it seems like a huge wasted opportunity to not have Hawkeye be Robin Hood, given that he's the Archer. Also, the Red Skull makes an appearance as an executioner, and Wanda Maximoff is called Wanda Merlin for some reason, even though there really isn't like any Arthurian legend type stuff in this episode. Now, in this universe, Steve Rogers is also the Forerunner in a somewhat similar manner, although his origin, instead of being captured by the government and sent back in time, is that during the fight with Thanos in Infinity War, he accidentally punches the Time Stone on the Infinity Gauntlet and it sends him to this time. Now, similar to how the story ended in the comic book, they basically have to create a machine that reopens time and is able to send this Steve Rogers back. And this leaves Peggy Carter sad because she thought she would have another opportunity to be with Steve Rogers, who is, in this version, he's healthy, he's whole. This is the super soldier version, not the Hydra Stomper version. Now, I'm sure to the mainstream audience, this was a fun and interesting episode, but because of how meaningful this story was to me as the first comic I ever read, it was just a huge disappointment. But yeah, that's pretty much that episode. One of the things I want to say is that despite this being a series titled What If, where crazy things could happen to these stories and these characters, they still limit themselves to the MCU characters that we've already seen outside of the episode with Kahori. But they don't allow us to see the X-Men or the Fantastic Four. It's like we're just stuck in this bubble of the same characters that we've been seeing for the past 15 or so years. And it's boring. Like, the difference between this and the What If comics is that the What If comics had access to all of the Marvel characters. So we didn't have to see the same 10 characters over and over again in different stories. And so now we are on the finale of Season 2, and I think the finale perfectly encapsulates just how meaningless Season 2 was. It was basically a long, drawn-out I Heart Captain Carter fest on behalf of Uatu the Watcher. So at the end of the 1602 episode, Strange Supreme collected Captain Carter from that universe and brought her to his Sanctum Infinitum, where he's holding universe destroyers, meaning characters that are incredibly strong and usually evil, in small orbs. Now, he passes it off as if he is basically saving the multiverse. However, he doesn't tell her that he's also been collecting heroes, but he tells Captain Carter that he has one more mission for her, and that's to collect another villain that's escaped. So he sends her to an alternate universe, which at first I thought was the Wastelands from the Old Man Logan universe because of the Red Skull statue on Mount Rushmore. But instead, it's just a universe where the super soldier experiment didn't work successfully, and so Hydra was able to take over the world. Now, the villain in this universe that she needs to capture is Kahori, who escaped Doctor Strange's sanctum. So Carter catches up to Kahori and distracts her long enough for Strange to pull both of them back into his sanctum and attempts to imprison Kahori inside one of the orbs. But before he succeeds, Kahori is able to reveal to Carter that Strange is actually using the universe killers and righteous heroes as fuel that he will throw into the forge and recreate his home universe with Christine in it. Now, Captain Carter and Kahori team up to defeat Strange because even though Carter would like to see Steve Rogers again, she realizes that he wouldn't want her to do a similar thing to what Strange is doing to recreate that universe. So the three characters fight, and in their fight, they end up releasing a number of the villains and heroes. You get some interesting looking alternate universe versions of Thor, Rocket Raccoon, Hulk. They also end up fighting Hela, the zombie Scarlet Witch, and a whole bunch of other people. Now, one of the disappointing things about this fight is that Strange Supreme uses a very small variety of magic. In fact, the majority of his attacks are him simply channeling focused magical energy into force beams rather than using spells that would actually help him in the fight much quicker. Meanwhile, Kahori and Carter are trying to stop the other characters from falling into the forge, and Kahori actually saves about half of them by using her Space Stone power to create portals taking them back to their home universes. Though if she was able to do that, why wouldn't she have used that power on herself to transport herself from that wasteland universe back to her home universe? The two heroes also end up releasing and fighting Killmonger from the Season 1 finale, who had the Infinity Stone Ultron suit, and Kahori teleports Killmonger outside of the suit so that Captain Carter can use it. Now, even though she has all the powers of the Infinity Stones, she really only uses the power of the Power Stone, while Kahori is using her Space Stone power against Doctor Strange. So neither side is really using the full range of their abilities, and so the fight kind of drags on until a number of the villains and some of the heroes give Kahori and Carter their weapons. Hela gives Carter her helmet, this Valkyrie-looking Hulk gives Carter his sword, Kahori picks up a version of Mjolnir using the Space Stone power, which is definitely something to think about. I'm not sure how that works exactly. I guess it would come down to whether or not the Space Stone is more powerful than Odin's enchantment. But Kahori also gets, I think, 5 of the 10 rings from a version of Wenwu. So, despite these new weapons, the fight still continues to drag on. At one point, Captain Carter holds all 6 Infinity Stones in her bare hand and punches the demons out of Strange Supreme. They don't explain how she was able to hold the Infinity Stones. Nothing happens to her, she doesn't die or anything. So I'm not sure if that's the writers basically saying that if Captain America had used the Infinity Gauntlet in Endgame, that he would have survived, even though the Hulk definitely received damage. So it was either that or it was just a massive plot hole, given the importance of the Infinity Saga. But the demons do retake Strange, and the fight continues until he falls into the forge, because Strange kind of was able to basically prevent the demons from taking over fully, and I guess in a moment of redemption, he prevented the demon from killing Carter and Kahori. Except he does succeed in recreating his home universe, except he wasn't ever born into this universe, so in a way he kind of erases himself from existence. But Captain Carter and Kahori both survive. Kahori is sent to her home universe. Carter is offered the same by Uatu, but she decides that she wants to go on a trip with Uatu to witness the universe. And so I guess that will be the premise for Season 3. And the way that the universe is viewed is actually the way that it was recreated by Loki at the end of Loki Season 2, where instead of a sacred timeline or the temporal loom, it now looks like the world tree Yggdrasil. It's interesting that they decided to tie that in, and it kind of solidifies the place of What If Season 2, but I'm also a little surprised that they didn't include Loki. But since there's a Season 3 on the way, I suppose that gives them the opportunity to bring the ultra-powerful Loki God of Stories back. In terms of my overall opinion of this season, I think it was fairly lacking in substance. And as I mentioned before, I think the 1602 episode perfectly demonstrates the philosophy behind the writing of each episode, which was more or less, hey, wouldn't it be funny if this thing happened? Instead of doing some interesting and wild stuff and really diving into the spirit of each of these universes, and overall having a more meaningful story like each of the episodes of Season 1 did. Season 1, each episode, for the most part, had a meaningful story, but there was also an overarching narrative. Whereas this season, it's just a rehash of something we've already seen, which is Doctor Strange turning evil in order to recreate his universe, and the lengths that he would go to do that. We've already seen this. They made it a little bit bigger in scale because instead of fighting a version of himself, he's fighting 2 multiversal heroes and the collected villains and heroes from across the multiverse. And they also threw in a bunch of recognizable weapons and armor into the fray to give Carter and Kahori a boost. But it doesn't really matter. Like Steve Rogers getting Mjolnir at the end of Avengers Endgame matters because it symbolizes his character development from Captain America the First Avenger to Avengers Endgame. In the first Avengers film, Tony Stark told Steve Rogers that he wasn't special, that everything special about him came from a bottle. Well, Endgame proved that wrong when it turned out that Steve Rogers was worthy of Mjolnir. Carter and Kahori getting the different weapons at the end of this episode didn't mean anything. It was just the writer saying, hey, wouldn't it be cool if we just threw all this stuff in there? Just throw every possible concept at the wall and see if people like it. Makes me a little surprised that they want to do a season 3, given the lack of creativity in this season. Now, was it as bad as everything else Marvel's put out this year? Not even close. But it was just a disappointment when you compare it to season 1. And also, why are they building up Captain Carter so much? Is she going to appear in one of the Secret Wars films? It'd be kind of funny given how her first live action appearance went, and I'm not sure anyone out there is actually craving a Captain Carter reappearance in the live action MCU. To end this on a high note, I will say that episode 2 was kind of the saving grace of this season. To me, creativity isn't about breaking the rules when they don't suit you. It's finding a way to do something different and interesting within the existing framework, which is exactly what episode 2 did. It was interesting to see the Marvel Universe as it was, not changing a whole lot, but simply taking characters that didn't interact and putting them together in an interesting and creative, but also grounded story. But that's enough for me. I'm happy that season 2 is finally over. Let me know what you guys thought about it in the comment section below. As always, if you enjoyed this video, please hit that like and subscribe button, as well as the notification bell so that you never miss out on a new video. Thanks for watching.